Hello, and welcome to the House of Kanaz. This is my second episode. My name is Stephen Perry, and this is my space for me to talk about all things metaphysical that I am currently thinking about, working through with a focus on tarot and astrology. And I have a little notebook that I've been keeping notes in for my episodes to keep my brain organized on the things I want to talk about. So again, my goal at the moment is for this podcast to be a monthly podcast, at least until I get more of a rhythm down, but that's what I can handle. So that's what it's going to be for the time being. And I want to talk to you about what's happened since the last episode, so since last month. And I have spent a lot of time learning and educating myself. So I took a course on solar arc directions, which is an astrological technique that's used in prediction. And I took that with an astrologer by the name of Maria de Simone. And I stumbled upon her very randomly, I would say. Like I have seen her videos, I believe, like years ago, but she wasn't someone that I would like um actively follow. And I was reading a book and they mentioned this technique, and I was like, I know what it is like mathematically, but let's see if I can find an astrologer who's using this and can go through some examples. And, I go on YouTube and her video came up, and it was a video that was recently published. And she went over a few examples and then she's like, I'm teaching a course. And the course started in a few weeks, after that video was published. And I was like, all right, like it is decided, like I must take this. And this is something that has happened to me before. Um, in particular, last year, I was, I had this phrase in my head for a few months, this concept of trying to figure out a way to integrate mediumship with the tarot. And I was like, I need to figure this out. And I Googled, but I couldn't find anything. And then one day on Instagram, a guy I follow, I believe his name is Hermit's Mirror, he posted in his stories a course that was being offered by Jenna Matlin on using the tarot for mediumship. And I did not even skip a beat. I immediately registered. And to me, I feel like if there is something that I am interested in, that I am uh yeah, wanting to learn about, just just go head deep. Like there's no reason really to delay that. Maybe this is all the Aries in my astrological chart, but I don't even think about it. Like I really stop everything that I'm doing and I say, okay, let me check my calendar. Let me make sure that I have the time, and I have the resources, and let's just do it. Um, and I'm very, I do think it's very important to, at least for me, it's become more and more important for me to be connected to instructors, to teachers, to people in the metaphysical community in general, just because I feel like I have felt a bit adrift from it for many, many years. And it's a way for me to feel less alone. It's a way for me to feel connected with like-minded, like-hearted people, and that's really important. And so I took this class with Maria. It was 4 weeks long, so every Sunday we would meet for about like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, somewhere around there. And it was very thorough. Like um, I really appreciated all the examples that she went over because you could see the technique used in different circumstances, in different life circumstances. And at least for me, what I find really interesting about astrology is that it is just a system that it's a way to organize time. It's a way to organize the cycles of our life, right? And it's a way for us to have a language to understand that at any given point, we are under multiple cycles. There's multiple stories that are happening, but astrology gives us the framework that we can have an architecture or structure around what what's going on, how to describe the the things that we're going through. So that's been really useful. And part of that course was a book by Noel Teal on solar arcs. And this is a book that I've been meaning to read. And so it was good to have the time to read that book. And it's still a book that I'm working my way through. There are parts of it that are very, very dense. But again, my background is in mathematics. So I love the technical aspects of astrology. That's something that I really greatly enjoy. And it's something that, when I left mathematics in regards to studying it in a more theoretical sense, which was about 10 years ago, I went into a depression. It really, it wasn't until I started studying astrology about 5 years ago that I realized that astrology could fill this void that I was having from the absence of mathematics because what I studied in mathematics was very abstract, and that's something that I greatly enjoy is dealing within that space of patterns, abstract patterns, and abstract patterns that are metaphorical to other abstract patterns. And my training in mathematics, I think, greatly benefits me in astrology because those skills of recognizing likeness of metaphors, mathematically speaking, it's the same thing in astrology. So I feel like astrology has given me it's an amazing field to study in that there's always things to learn, right? So when I feel a sense in myself of like, all right, like let's go and learn something new, there's always going to be something new, right? Like there's always going to be something that I'm like, oh, I should know a little bit about this. Like I don't necessarily need to be an expert on that thing, but I think that informing myself on at least the way that the general philosophy or the general theory about how a technique might work is quite useful. So that is the reason why I was inspired to take this course. And okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about astrology in a technical sense now. So in this course, there's three different astrological techniques that we're um, presented as kind of like these are the main tools that she uses for prediction, right? So transits, which are what's in the sky right now, right? Those are what we call transits. And then we have secondary progressions and solar arcs. Those are the three that Maria really hones in on saying like these are really useful to use in conjunction in regards to predicting events. Okay. Um, so I've been really reflecting a lot on secondary progressions because what secondary progressions are is that this is a technique that has existed for millennia, where essentially the the equation is that for every day of your life, it equals a year. So, for instance, if you are turning 40 years old, right, you look at what was happening 40 days after you were born. And that 40th day after you're born is it's like a snapshot of like what your 40th year will be like. And so I like this kind of fractal element um, of it, that this 40th day that you live on Earth, there's something metaphorical in that 40th day that is represented in your 40th year on this Earth. And that's what secondary progressions are. Um, And what solar arcs are is you're taking the distance that the sun has traveled. So, like, let's say that I'm talking about my solar arcs on my 40th birthday, for instance. So, I'm looking at the distance that the sun has traveled over those 40 days, and then essentially adding that to all the planets and seeing what aspects, what connections they make to my natal chart. Now, one thing that I didn't know before I started reading this book was about tertiary progressions. So, whereas secondary progressions is basically saying like one day equals 1 month, tertiary progressions says that one day, I think I might have messed up. All right, let me repeat that. Secondary progressions has the equation one day equals 1 year, whereas tertiary progressions is one day equals 1 month. So again, there's this like fractal element here, whereas like, again, if I'm thinking about that 40th day after my birth, right? Like that was just one day after my birth, but that's emblematic of the 40th year that I'm going to live, also the 40th lunar cycle that I live under. So, like when I'm like 3.25 years old, that's what that's representing under a tertiary progression. So, again, it's this like fractalness of these repeated themes of like what a baby can what a baby can express or be situated in what a baby can experience on its 40th day. There's something that is parallel. There's something that is analogous to what one experiences on their in their 40th year. And I think that's really just fascinating, that connection, as well as connecting that to your 40th month, right? Um, so I've been really thinking a lot about just the fractal nature of that, going back to what I was just talking about, of like all the different cycles in astrology. And this is just providing like another layer of those cycles. That's So that's kind of what I'm working on astrologically is really understanding this technique. And it's been really interesting, if you are studying astrology, the I think one of the most interesting ways to learn astrology is to use your chart. And as I was learning about these solar arc techniques, like basically going back and seeing when did I have significant solar arc um, connections in my chart, and then thinking about like what was happening in my life at that time. And so I think it's a really interesting way of like organizing time, organizing your life, organizing your history. Again, astrology provides you with these tools to do that. And I also think from like a consulting perspective, it provides a framework in which the conversation can flow, right? Similar to, I believe, tarot cards can, what's the best way of saying this? I can say things more direct sometimes with tarot cards than I can say without them because I can be like, well, that's what the cards say, like that's what I'm getting from the cards. And it provides me with a vehicle in which I can get to the heart of the matter in a more direct um framework. Whereas if I'm just allowing the person to control the conversation and they want to like actually talk about something real, it could take hours to get to the point in which in astrology, if I look at the chart, I'm gonna see it in a minute, right? Like I'm gonna know, like, oh yeah, like this is what's going to happen. This is where the tension is in your chart. Let's really think about how is that being reflected in your life? Like, how are you experiencing this? So that's what's happening to me astrologically. But then on top of that, in the past month, I have how did this even happen? I've gone down this rabbit hole in past life regression and hypnosis. I've been interested in hypnosis and been using it for about 7 years. And the way that I fell into hypnosis was not from like not in a past life regression framework, but more from I would say like a sexual framework. And it was during a period of time in which I felt incredibly bored with um the visual, like just pornography in general. Like I just was not interested in that. And I realized what was capturing me in pornography was stories. And more importantly, hypnosis that was embedded in pornography. Like I could be what I needed was just the audio part. Like I can close my eyes and see invent a scene. I can follow the audio essentially and just invent a scene in my head. Um and so that was like the impetus in 2018 for me to go down this pathway where I started consuming more of this content and then started to explore making that content and like understanding the bits and the pieces. And um so it's like completely by accident that I found myself in that field. And it's been something that I've always been interested in. And since my mother has passed, which happened like last year, there's I've I've had like a whole new view, like my whole idea around life and death has changed, and it is still evolving, but it's not as black and white as I thought it was, and I thought, and maybe, what I was originally thinking is still true, but I really thought that what we don't, let's say this, my past explanation was really focused on the brain and the mind, in that there is so much that is going on in our head that we have yet to fully understand, right? There are limitations to our knowledge, there's limitations in our machines, in our devices, in what we can measure, right? We only know what we know, right? We don't know what we don't know. And so I always kind of like waved off past life stuff and a lot of paranormal stuff as that's just, like that exists, but we are the cause of it. It's like we are the source. And it's still potentially that's the case. But I always believe that like if I'm going through, like if someone's having a communication or like a medium, um, I was under the belief that a medium was just connecting to me in some way to read the information and to convey the information. And that is a talent, like I guess what I'm trying to say is that I I view things more as like telepathy. Like I always felt like telepathy was the explanation around what was going on until I started getting um, visitations from my mother in multiple ways and in ways that we had agreed upon decades ago. In that, like, right after she passed, for the 2 weeks before I went down for the memorial service, lights in my house would blink. And that was the signal, when I could speak to lights. That was the signal that we had agreed upon. That she was like, I'm going to play with the lights. Um, that's the signal. So I had that, but also she has now visited me in my dreams twice. And that's been really illuminating. And both times, like, it's very peaceful, like, she is in a good environment. She looks very young, she's very healthy. Like, I know it's her. And it's been a very healing process, but it has made me expand the possibilities and, you know, has made me reconsider perhaps what is going on and to be more open to things. Okay, so that's where I want to say like maybe it was a month ago. No, so maybe like 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. It was sometime this summer that I decided, like, I woke up, it was like a Saturday. I woke up and I was like, let's just do a past life regression for fun, and I have listened to a variety of hypnosis tracks. So to bring back, um, I stumbled upon hypnosis more from like a sexual exploration um, track, and now I am exploring hypnosis from a more like spiritual psychic development track. And I feel like that is really interesting. So I woke up again a few weeks or a month ago, and I was like, all right, let's just let's try to find a past life regression track and let's see what happens. Let's just fucking do it. So that's what I did. I had never listened to this track before. I had never I've never done something like this one before. Like I certainly have put myself under hypnosis, and it's something that I have gone under hypnosis, I believe, from many people that probably are not formally trained, but it's something that I have, like, I very much enjoy that. Like that type of connection is something I certainly seek out. Um, so yeah, I found a track, and if I can find it again, I will put it in the show notes. So I found this track and just listened along. Like I basically laid in my bed, and I have these blindfolds that I put on that are called a mindful. Um, and I found out about it through the telepathy tapes. So if you're interested, um, I think like listening to the telepathy tapes podcast last year also kind of like kickstarted this reinvestigation into a lot of things. That's probably for another time. Anyway, so I put on this track and I had I had an experience, and it was very emotional, and I found myself releasing a lot of emotion, crying for no reason, um, and then reliving an experience that was difficult. I will say that. I don't want to go on the ins and outs of what I saw, but it wasn't a natural death. We'll say that. We'll say that. And it's I mean, I've been thinking about it every day since it happened. So after this whole experience, and I got a name, I couldn't find anything about the guy. I couldn't find like any records, but this name popped up, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So also, okay, yeah, I have been going down like a Dolores Cannon kick for the past few months. And if you don't know who Dolores Cannon is, she is one of the, I don't want to say founders, but she is like one of the people that have that developed hypnosis and past life regression and things like that. So like she is, I think, like one of the staples. She's done a lot of research, and I figured out, or I realized that all of her books I can listen to on my Spotify account. And so that's what I've been doing for the past few months, is like going through her books. And that might be a separate podcast in of itself, because um there's a lot there that I find interesting. And that probably, yeah, that I'm piecing this all together. So I did not write notes on this. Yeah, so I've been going down a Dolores Cannon kick, which again, somewhat controversial, but I think that there are things there that are interesting. And that's what led me to actually trying to conduct a past life regression onto myself. And then I was like, all right, I need to. I need to actually have a professional do this onto me. And this is, I think, really key in any metaphysical study. Again, whether that's astrology, whether that's tarot, whether that is mediumship, whether that is hypnosis, right? Really going to someone who knows what the fuck they're doing, you will learn so much from them. And that is my goal. Um, and so I ended up finding a woman who lives in my area in upstate New York, and she has her own school in focusing on hypnosis and other metaphysical studies. And so I contacted her. I just sent her an email and said, I'm looking to get a past life regression done. And then a few weeks went by. We set up an appointment, a meeting, and it was intense just because, I described to her what had been happening to me with my visitations from my mom and uh, also putting myself under a past life regression and what had happened there. And she was like, you handled it perfectly. Like I, in that past life regression, like I knew to leave my body. Um, as I was describing to her, like what had happened, like I left my body and she's like, yeah, you handled it like as you were supposed to, in a way that like did not harm you. So anyway, she like really consoled me and has one thing that I've realized is that a lot of people in this field of study have gone through similar journeys in regards to having difficult relationships, having trouble relating to people, and all these things. Like, again, being super sensitive. And in regards to when I say the word sensitive, what I mean is I pick up on a lot of things. I pick up on a lot of things that other people don't pick up on. And it's only this year that I started realizing like how much that's been a problem in my relationships. Like it wasn't until this year that I realized, like I actually put that to words of what happens to me psychically in relationships and why it's so difficult for me to be in relationships and how it fucks with my energy. Which is something I'm currently learning. Again, I at this phase of the podcast, I am not pretending to be a master of anything. This is for me to record my journey of what I am going through. Um, Anyway, so she has given me a hypnosis track that's about 24 minutes long that I have to listen to 3 times a week. And it is interesting in that every time I listen to this track, it's like a different, it's like a different experience. Like I see the same images up into a point, and then depending on like how tired I am and the way I'm sitting or the way I'm laying, like it's different. And I find that really fascinating. So I don't have my past life regression scheduled until the end, I think it's the end of September. So there's going to be a few more weeks of me listening to this track, and it's all for me to just get comfortable taking directions from her. Um, so yeah, that's like that's another area of development. And in that area of development, like we had a lot of conversations, and I think that I'm interested in attending her school. Like I'm seeing myself the next few months like pretty occupied with studying astrology. Like I've set myself up with like a course of every, I don't want to say this, like I've set myself up in such a way that I have lined courses and webinars and seminars and things like that that I'm going to for the next few months. But after that, then I want to focus in on her school. In the meantime, though, she has given me a fantastic list of books to read on past life regressions, on mediumship, on spirituality in general. And that's something that I am just diving deep in. Um, I, this week, I'll share with you some of the things that I've been reading. So I this week finished this book called Between Lives. This was written by Andy Tomlinson and Rena Kumarasingham. If you were watching this on video, you should be able to see the image of this book. Anyway, this is a fantastic book just because it explores different layers of what's going on. So not only like so it focuses on like first what is consciousness, and then talking about near death experiences. So that's something that's happening like in your life. And like you get in an accident, like have something traumatic happen where you do like eject from your body and go through a journey. And then you have past life regressions where you are in your body, but you are projecting onto a past life. Um, and then they talk about the what they call between lives spiritual regression. So that's what's happening like after you die in a past life, the time frame between that life and the next life, essentially. And then there's a lot of talk about just like intuition and energy and um, connecting with yourself, connecting with your soul. So I felt like this is like a fantastic book that if you've never read anything in this field of just like past life, what happens after death, that type of thing, this is a fantastic book, I thought, to have like a brief understanding. If you've read things, and this book was published this year, so it is uh, it's very modern, it's very easy to read. Um, Now, if you've read things in the past on this topic, like this may be like a nice coalescing of those topics, which I thought it is. There's also a lot of exercises. So like I have circled like a lot of exercises that I'm going to go back. And I think one of my goals is to develop, since I do have experience in developing audio tracks, my goal is to take some of these exercises and see if I can develop an audio track to maybe I'll put that on like a Patreon or something, but this is like a few months down the line. Um, to make an audio track and have other people listen to these things and see what happens. So that's one thing that I'm thinking about. I'm currently reading this book that's called Reliving Past Lives, and there's a lot of overlap here, but this current book that I'm reading, really, I believe it was published in the 70s, like 77 or so. And this book is written by someone who conducted past life regressions. And so it's from the therapist standpoint. And so it's a lot of like she does share her like techniques of some of the ways, some of the images that she has people go through in their heads, some of the prompts that she gives. But it is a lot of case studies, a lot of recollections from her clients in ways that things that they experienced. Um, and then I'm going through this section, which she had, she had more than like 1,000 clients, and she was doing these seminars, and she would have them fill out like a survey at the end. And then she basically made graphs of, for instance, like this graph is the gender distribution across time of the past life regressions, and you can see like on average, it kind of equals out to pretty even splits. And then she has another graph of like what people were wearing over time in their past life regressions. She has these different categories for like dresses or pants and draped garments and hides. And you can see when you look at this that dresses and pants are pretty low up until it's about like 1700 that there's like a spike there. So yeah, I mean, like it's really fascinating, and I'm learning a lot from it. And connected to that, again, I find it very interesting when a name pops up. There's a name for this thing that I'm going to describe, but like when a book or a song or a name pops up multiple times, like like when you once you become conscious of something and you notice it all the time. So point being, like it was probably back in February or March. I was watching some random YouTube video about a psychic, and they mentioned this book. This book is called The Silva Mind Control Method um, by Jose Silva. And she had mentioned that like this was an important foundational book for her in regards to learning hypnosis. And I remember like, listening to that, stopping everything, going to my computer and buying the book and just like so it could exist on my shelf, right? And then I remember maybe it was like in May, April or May. Again, like I'm listening to a podcast and then they mentioned this book. And I'm like, you know what? I had that book, like I should just go and read it. And so I started reading it. And again, he outlines his the directions of how he approaches hypnosis and like the ways, like when you close your eyes, like you picture a TV, and then you're picturing images moving left to right, and he kind of walks you through that technique of how he gets people under. And I think that's really fascinating. I always think it's really interesting anytime I do any of these techniques, just what images am I picturing? Like, what does that TV look like? What is that? And the TV that, like in my head, like when I closed my eyes and I was, when I was studying this, the TV was very similar to the TV that I remember being in our living room when I was a child, like when I was like 4 years old. And I don't even know how to describe this, but it's like a big box TV that was in this like wooden, it's like it was this giant wooden thing. I don't know how much it weighed because I was like 4 years old, but it was like the TV was attached to this wooden thing, and it was big and yeah, so like it was a very old school thing. Um, anyway, that's the TV. Like I picture a TV in a corner, and it's basically like a 1970s, 1980s big TV that I'm picturing. And for some reason, when I do that exercise, it's like black and white, like in my head. And then before I go into the TV room in this imagery, like I'm picturing the house. Like I think initially, like I'm picturing a house, but for some reason, when I picture the house, I am picturing like this place I was in Poland. Like I forget which scientist lived in Poland, but I remember visiting. Like, is it Copernicus? I forget. I need to look this up. But I remember being at this place. I probably need to look this up. Hold on. I'm gonna just do this while Zoom is running because this is. I need to figure this out. Who is this? I had to say I forget even the city that I was in. Am I gonna have to edit this? I don't want to edit this out. Um, I don't know if I am going to solve this. And if someone uh figures this out, I'm gonna let me see if I can Google one last thing. Which scientist lived in Poland? Um, yeah, Copernicus. It was the first name. Okay, Nicholas Copernicus. Copernicus whole I think it's Copernicus House. Yeah, Toron. It's in Toron. Okay, so if you look this up, I'm gonna see, hold on. Um, I'm gonna share my screen. So in case you are watching, you can see this image of um, Copernicus's house in Poland. And for some reason, when I close my eyes, I imagine myself walking in front of this. Um, that's where my mind brings me. And, Copernicus totally revolutionized our idea of the solar system. He kind of also fucked astrology being kicked out of academia because of the way in which our perceptions changed in how we view the solar system. Because astrology, again, is the Earth is in the center, and you're looking at how the planets relate to Earth rather than Earth and all the planets revolving around the sun, right? Astrology is based on an Earth centric model, but again, that is our reality, that is our perception, right? Like, so astrology is reflecting back our perception. And like at the end of the day, it's a system that works. So whatever, like that's how I feel about that. So, how long have I been speaking? I want to say that it's been like close to an hour. And I think that's all I want to talk about today. But I want to end with a few thoughts on tarot. And I was recently, like 2 days ago, doing tarot card readings for a local event. And before I started getting into the readings, because I was like sitting in my little corner, I was reflecting on like a lot of times people come to me and they don't have questions when they want a tarot reading. And that makes my life really difficult because when I am shuffling the cards, when I am pulling cards, the interpretation in which I am giving the cards is associated with the question. So there always needs to be a question. There always needs to be a question. But sometimes people will be like, oh, I just want like a very general reading. And I sometimes I struggle with that because I'm like, aren't you like, isn't there at least one thing that you're like, I'm really struggling on this thing. Like, I want to talk about this. Anyway, I was reading this book, Tarot Mirror of the Soul, uh, by Gerd Ziegler. And this is a book that is based off of the deck that I've been using most often the past few years, this Thoth deck. And I use this deck because there's a lot of symbols and because the astrology is embedded in the cards. So I enjoy that. And this is a really great book in regards to if you need a reference on like what cards could represent, um, keywords, their interpretation, so forth. But the story I wanted to connect it to was how I dealt with in this past reading, how I dealt with the client who came to me and they didn't have a question. And before that reading, I I was reading, in the back of the book, they're giving different spreads. And I found the spread that was quite useful. It's a four-card spread in which you shuffle your cards until you feel good, and then you divide the cards into two piles. Okay. And then so you have the left pile and you have the right pile. The left pile represents your passive, receptive aspects, and the one on the right represents outgoing, active aspects. Essentially, what you do is when you split your deck into half, then you pull the top card um, and the bottom card of each of those decks. So let me explain a little bit more. So essentially, trying to read and interpret it all at the same time because the way that they wrote it, it's not exactly how it's in my head. Um, okay, so on the left-hand deck, you shuffle, right? And then you get the top card and the bottom card. The top card and the bottom card are in these like position, what they call position 2 and position 3. So the top card of that left deck is representing like what's happening inward to you, um, whereas the third card is representing like how it's being expressed, essentially. So, it- and perhaps I need to demonstrate this. Whereas the right card on the top and the bottom, um, the top card gave the theme. So essentially, and the bottom card gave the answer. So essentially, this was a way for me, this technique was a way for me to identify a topic to talk about and to understand that topic from what's happening to them internally and what's happening externally. So it was really interesting because I gave myself this reading as I was like preparing. Like before I have clients come in, I usually give myself a reading to see what are the cards saying about like how, what do I need to be aware of? What do we need to think about? Are the things I need to be aware of? And I gave myself this reading, and it was really interesting because I had a client come in at the end of the night. It was like the last person I saw, and she didn't have a topic that she wanted to talk about. So I was like, I'm going to give you this type of reading. I shuffled the cards, and her reading was so similar to mine. And like two of the cards were the same, like in the same position. And I was like, am I reading for myself or am I reading for this person? But she really connected with it. And, and it was all around how, um, both of us, we can sometimes be quite cruel in regards to our intuition. So, like, the theme was around intuition and trusting ourselves, in that we sometimes don't trust ourselves. We're like beating ourselves up in the inside, but on the outside, like people are being like, yeah, like you're right. Like that, the thing that you had predicted was right, but like we're being like really self-critical, and the lesson there is to really be more kind to yourself. It's the general reading for both of us, like, and different cards like kind of hinted at different things, but I thought that was like really interesting. So that's a technique that I'm going to be using in the future, I believe, when I have clients that just don't have a topic. And my goal, I haven't like published this on my website yet, but my goal is to take clients over Zoom. But again, I'm still like getting my bearings set. So like I maybe in like a few months, I will set that up. Anyway, as we depart, and I didn't even talk about the astrology. I don't think it's, let me show you what's going on. I'm going to share my screen again and kind of walk you through maybe what's happening. Um, so this program that I'm using is Astro Gold, and this is what's happening in the sky right now. And it really depends when you look at astrology. What are you using it for? Right? Like what are the things that you're using it for? Because if I'm talking about a person, I may focus on different things than, especially if I know the chart, than if I'm talking about the world and mundane life. One thing that happened between the first episode and this current episode, there's a few things. There was the new moon in Leo, and that was like my anchoring point. Like that was the inspiration uh, for me to get my ass into gear and to make that episode. And it was opposite Pluto, and I was like, this is gonna be a very intense time. And that was when like you in the news there was all these famous people that had died, like Hulk Hogan and what was it, Ozzy Osbourne, the guy from the Cosbys, Theo, forgetting his name. Um, that was that was like plus or minus that new moon, right? That was Sun being opposite Pluto. So, and then we have Mercury retrograde. That's already happened, right? So Mercury retrograde, let me just show you. Let me show you where it started. Do, 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 do. There. Okay. So by July 19th, it started. I can tell because this little symbol here, um, Mercury, and the number turns red, so that indicates retrograde. And it went until August, August 12th. Hold on. Yeah, by August 12th, it was done. So again, it's like a 3 week thing. Um, and like for me personally, um, this Mercury retrograde, it's it was just people missing meetings, people canceling meetings, um, miscommunication. It was a very typical thing, right? I didn't have a major snafu with it. It didn't really hit my chart in any particular like impactful way, but it was the things that happened to me were very Mercury retrograde. Um, anyway, that's past. But when you think about big events that are happening in the world, the thing that I have been studying and been really noticing, so I've been watching one thing. I'll leave you with this. I've been watching Mars and watching how Mars relates to the outer planets. So whenever Mars is connecting in some way to Pluto or Neptune or Uranus. I think that's really interesting. And we just have been leaving this time, which has been very newsy, like a lot of things been happening with like Trump, um, Epstein files, with the conference with Trump and Putin and things like that. And we have this Mars being opposite Saturn and Neptune. And that has been it was really tense like around August 9th. Like I would say it started getting tense like August 7th. And now I feel, if I'm going like 3 degrees out. Like I would say it's not that operative at the moment. Um, so I feel like the next, hmm, I haven't spent so much time looking at this. One thing that, like, the thing that I'm keeping my eye out for is that there's a few things. We have eclipses that are coming, and they're going to be starting in a few weeks. And so the eclipse is happening when we have the sun, the moon, and the nodes in an alignment. So that's often this period that we're going to be entering at the end of August, September time. That's also going to be a time, like it kind of kickstarts a time of a new cycle, a time of transformation, a time of like um, big things happening. So that will be interesting to to just watch. I don't think in the next month, if I look at this chart, I don't think. I mean, sure, like Mars is going to square Jupiter. I don't think that that's going to be so malefic. I think it's going to be really interesting though later in the year when we have Mars and Uranus squaring, which isn't until like November. That will be interesting. But until the next episode, I think the major thing is probably going to be looking at the eclipses and just noticing those stories because I think that they're going to be big. In particular, let me see if I can get this more precise. So let me make this minutes. Yeah. So you can see here, this is the full moon in Pisces that's happening in September 8th. So that might be before the next podcast. I don't know. Um, this I think is going to be kind of dramatic. This is our next eclipse, solar eclipse. So we have this full moon. Again, it's full because the sun and the moon are at the same degrees, so 15 degrees, 22 minutes, and they're opposite. So they're in opposite signs. Um, so, we got Virgo, the sun's in Virgo, the moon is in Pisces, opposite signs. However, the sun, you know, again, it's so close to the node, so that's what's indicating the eclipse. Mercury is also going to play a role. So there's something about communications that's going to be really vital um, here that I think it's going to be really interesting. Um, Maybe big news is going to happen. Let me see if there's any. If I look at the sun, is there anything else? The sun is going to be sextile Jupiter. So there is, some potential of things expanding, that news getting bigger. So yeah, there could be some drama there. That might be an interesting date to to think about. Anyway, I've been talking for a long time, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. But before I leave, I want to do a little tarot reading to think about what it is in the next, between this episode and the next episode. What's something that we need to guidance around? What's what's something to think about? What's the message the tarot wants to give us? I'll show you. Three. And I have also been utilizing a rune deck. So the past like year or so, I've been using this Sunstone rune deck as a way to learn the runes. And I'm going to pull a card from this deck as well. This deck doesn't spread as nicely as the other deck. All right, let's see what we have. Give myself some tea before I start interpreting everything. Okay, so first card, the Tower. Um, yeah, so I've already talked for so long that I'm like, oh my God, do I have more in me? Yeah, the Tower represents, you know, often when you look at the tower, there's like a lightning that's striking the tower, right? This is something in which you can't avoid. Like this is something in which you are going to be forced to evolve. You are going to be forced to deal with something that may be unpleasant. There, there is something here in which you have to learn to let go of control. Like this card really commands you to, like if you are in an ocean, you're not supposed to fight the current. You're supposed to, you don't want to end up in a panic, um, and be fighting a current. And that's what this card reminds me of like you kind of just have to be able to go with the flow. And even if it's chaotic, you don't want to lose yourself. Like you can get swept up in this drama, right? You can lose yourself. Um, the goal here is not to lose yourself, but to see how can you transform yourself? What is it that you can learn from the situation, even when it's bullshit? Like I don't want to just like spiritually bypass things, like recognize when it is like feel the emotions, okay? But also, uh, is there a way in which you can um transform yourself from this experience? I mean, let's see what the other cards are. All right. So this card, which this is the card that popped up in multiple readings I had a few days ago. This cruelty card. This is the Nine of Swords. This is a Mars in Gemini card. And in this Thoth deck, the Tower is represented by Mars. And I think that that's just because this my take on this is because the Tower, like um Crawley, who developed this deck, this was before like Pluto was well integrated into astrology. So I believe that this is more of a Pluto card than a Mars card, but it's still like um Scorpio themes. Anyway, so there is Mars on this card. Point being, Mars is in the second card. So Mars is showing its head multiple times. That is a theme. Mars is how we do things. And this card is about how we can be. So if you think about swords, swords are thoughts. And this card is how we can be cruel with our thoughts, with our words, right? We might be really sharp and we might cut ourselves or we might cut other people, right? These swords have blood dripping out of them or on them, however you want to say it. So there's something here where you don't want to mince your words. The third card that I pulled is the devil. Now, in this deck, the devil doesn't have like the puritanical Christian interpretation. If you're looking at this video, this is very phallic, and that is for a reason. Because this devil card is representing manifestation, right? It looks like balls and a penis. And from, that set of genitalia comes creation, right? Like, and so that's what this is all about. Um, this card is about what it is that you want to manifest. So, putting that all together, I'm seeing that the tower structures are falling down, things are happening, right? You might be really critical with your words, or other people might be really critical with your words. Point being, watch what you say, watch what you say. But then the devil is having us introspect and be like, but what do we want to actually create? What do we want to manifest, right? If the tower is removing some old systems and freeing up space, the devil is saying, what do you want to do with that free space? How do you want to fill it? The Nine of Swords is saying, be careful. Be careful with who you associate with. Be careful with how you express your stress. Be careful how you respond to other people expressing their stress. Be careful, right? So there's some caution that I would say, but this is a time of change. Do you think kind of goes with that eclipse that I was just talking about? Of like, that eclipse could unlock something. And these cards are saying that, yeah, like something could fall down. Things could change, like in your life. Like whenever something is happening in your life, whenever you're going through something that in which you cannot control, you have to just go through it. But, you know, don't be a dick. Don't be, don't, don't take out your frustrations on other people. Be an adult, right? Like far too often, people are going through a difficult time and they take it out on other people and they think that they have the right to do that. They don't, right? They end up hurting themselves more by doing that and not taking accountability. But after you process what you've gone through, whether this is at the micro level or the macro level, you have a choice. What do you want to do with that? How do you want to move forward? What do you actually want to create? That's what these cards are telling you. Now, let me wrap this up with the rune that we pulled. And this is something that I am still studying. So bear with me as I look up the interpretation. So this is the rune called Behu, and it symbolizes abundance, luck, circulation of wealth. Um, it is a rune of resource. And this word directly translates into the word cattle. Again, associating it with wealth. So this rune can be a physical, emotional, spiritual, or energetic resource. It is the will within us that pushes us forward, the creativity that dreams to be born. So, again, what I'm tapping in here is I'm going to relate this back into the devil, because if the devil is about manifestation, this again, this rune is really calling us to think about our resources in regards to what resources do we have available. Like, if I'm going to manifest something, like, what is it that I want to manifest, but also what do I have like within me? Like, what will that manifestation cost me? Will it just be my time, energy? What do I actually have to put in that thing? And this rune is really calling that into focus and asking us to take stock of our resources, our physical resources, our emotional resources, spiritual and energetic resources. And I think that that's really important because as you're going through anything, those sectors of your life are going to be affected. Like, as you're going through a tower moment or watching a tower moment, you may feel spiritually depleted. You may feel nauseous, right? Like, you may feel depleted. And you may not have the energy to manifest, right? So it's about making sure that you are aware of what's happening inside of you. If you feel bad, that's okay, right? Like, we're not meant to feel okay every fucking day. But it is this card is asking us, if you ever heard of like the spoons theory, right? Like, this card is really asking to reflect on what do we actually have the capacity for, and maybe to reflect on what do we wish our capacity was, and is that even feasible? But this is asking us to take stock of where we are and where are we going. Okay. I have been speaking for a very long time. I don't know why I'm moving there. I'm going to just leave it there. Leave it here. I'm going to reflect on it. Um, anyway, I I hope that you enjoyed the second episode of the House of Kanaz, and I am posting this on Spotify and on YouTube. I would appreciate if you're able to subscribe, like, share, leave a comment. I also have an Instagram and a TikTok by this name, where I have been doing some other like mini readings. Whenever I feel inspired, I'm putting those readings on that account or those accounts. And yeah, again, in the future, I will be opening up the ability to have a reading with me. So that's coming down the line. as I work on the website. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode and let me know, are you into me rambling? Do you want shorter episodes? Or are you into this long, rambly mess of what's going on in my life? Anyway, let me know. And until next time, I hope you have a fantastic month.